हेलो गाइस, अस्सलाम वालेकुम गाइस। आज आज हम बात ऐसे आज का टॉपिक जो है मतलब फुल्ली टॉपिक तो नहीं है। फुल्ली टॉपिक ऐसे तो मतलब उसके ऊपर डिपेंडेंट नहीं रहेंगे, मतलब चेंज कर सकते हैं हम आगे करके। आज का टॉपिक ये है डाउनफॉल ऑफ द एम्पायर। एग्जाम्पल अमेरिका, ग्रीक है ना, ग्रीक ना, रोमन, पर्शियन एंड ईटीसी अदर, बहुत बहुत ज्यादा। तो देखते हैं क्या रीजन होता है, क्या डाउनफॉल का कारण बनता है, और स्टार्ट करते हैं। 1 घंटे की है और एक और चीज के ऊपर ये बात करनी है। मैं ये है 1 मिनट की वीडियो या 2 मिनट की वीडियो, तो मुझे दिखाना है तुम्हें guys। अब नियॉन एक मुस्लिम है यूट्यूबर, वो बड़ा बड़ा यूट्यूबर है, छोटा नहीं है। इस बंदे का पहला पहला इशू ये है, ये हर बात के ऊपर अ, करने मतलब क्या करने जाता है, एक्सक्यूज बहुत करता है, मतलब बहुत बहाने बनाता है। ये चीजें हो रही हैं, वो हो रही है, वो दुनिया हार्ड हो गई है। और पहले रमजान से पहले भी फोन की सिनीको को, तो मतलब मैं अब रमजान में रोजा कैसे रखूंगा, ओह माय गॉड, मतलब रोजा ये कैसे रखेगा, मुसलमान होके भी नॉन मुस्लिम भी रखते हैं इस टाइम पे चेक करने के लिए, तो ये हम क्या हम ये कर पाएंगे या नहीं। जैसे अभी मैं भी रोजे में हूँ, तो मैं कुछ भी गंदी बातें या गंदी चीजें या पानी पीना या बहुत चीजें अपने माइंड को पॉजिटिव रख के, और दूसरी प्रे करना, मतलब प्रे जो है वो ऐसे भी है, मतलब मैं किस चीज से इस्तेमाल भी करूँ, ये भी एक अच्छी चीज हो जाएगी, मतलब ये भी काउंट होगी उसमें। किसी को अच्छी चीज सिखाऊंगा, वो भी उसमें काउंट होगी। अब इसकी ये वीडियो सुनते हैं, मैंने सुनी है, आपके साथ भी सुनूंगा, तो हम इसके ऊपर बात करेंगे। और
Jesus movie. I'm chronically online and I see every clip. Listen, you fucking retard. I didn't know that there was. I didn't know that it was a fucking twerk party with a bunch of strippers, bro. What I was expecting was us to make tacos with the bros. Okay. Oh well, are you still locking in for a Ramadan? Dude, my asthma's so fucked. I can't even. I didn't even fast today, bro. I'm cooked, bro. I'm going to hell, bro. Like I'm not even kidding. I'm so stressed. I would have been lying. I don't know what to do, bro. I can't. I can't, bro. I can't. I don't know what to do, bro. I'm fucking cooked. Just try the best you can. How did your fast go today, bro? It was pretty easy. Oh my god, bro. Like, imagine trying to fast in LA. Like, how is this even possible? So leave LA. I just left Miami. I'm back in New York. Yeah, but you have like a strong mind. That's the whole point of Ramadan, is to strengthen your mind. Oh my god, bro. Just please send me those dates when you're going, bro. Oh, you want to pull up to New York now? Everybody's here. Warner's coming tomorrow. Slim, Adam. I don't want to be in the U.S., bro. The U.S. is the most fucking brain dead, retarded country ever, bro. I want to go to like a nice country where there's like no distractions. Well, it's good. The most important thing is to be around brothers who are on the same mission. Bro, listen, man. All right. Let me know when you're going to. You said you're going to those other countries, right? Yeah, I want to go Saudi at the end of the month. I was thinking about also maybe going to Morocco in a bit, but I'm going to stay in New York probably for a week or two. But just try your best. I mean, sounds like you're making some excuses. I mean, you could look, your excuse, if you need to use your inhaler, that doesn't count as breaking your fast if you need to survive. All right, now, real shit. All right, if I'm with an NFL player today, right, and he's putting me through an NFL workout, what do? You fast and do it. Or if it's easy for you to say, bro. You're doing the method. You're sleeping at 5 a.m., waking up at 1 p.m. I know exactly what you're doing. Okay, well, you have to choose your priorities. It's the bigger picture. It's like, why are you putting an ultimatum between NFL stream and Ramadan? What's more important? Obviously Ramadan, bro. Okay, so you got to figure out where your priorities are. Does not Ramadan even count if I have a dog? Yes. Alright, bro. I'm gonna try to lock in, bro. But oh my god, fuck me, man.
Your life's so hard. Multi-millionaire streamer with the hardest life, brother. There's people. Put it into perspective like this. There's kids in Gaza right now that are gonna fast, even though they've already been fasting for years because they're being starved actively right now. So if they can do it, why can't you?
Bro, you are such a manipulator.
No, I'm
You just
not.
made me look like a piece of shit.
अब हमने ये वीडियो देखी, आपने भी देखी और मैंने भी देखी। पहली बात, बंदे को एक जगह पे जाने से पहले, मतलब आप किसी जगह पे जाएंगे तो आपको मालूम होगा वहां क्या चीजें हो सकती हैं। मतलब ये ऐसे बोल रहा है जैसे हम 4 बंदे हैं, वहां जा रहे हैं और हम सिर्फ कोई खाना बनाएंगे, कोई फूड बनाएंगे, तो हमारा यही प्लान है। वो वहां पहुंचा तो मैंने देखा लड़कियां बहुत हैं। अब असल में स्ट्रॉन्ग माइंडेड लोग होगा, कोई भी बंदा होगा जिसका टफनेस उसकी होगी, उसको मतलब ज्यादा पता होगा सही चीज क्या है, गलत क्या है, वो यहाँ एक डिसीजन करेगा। वहां वो पार्टी छोड़ के चला जाएगा। ये स्ट्रॉन्ग माइंड वाला बंदा वही करेगा, छोड़ के चला जाएगा, बोलेगा मैं नहीं रुकने वाला, मैं जा रहा हूं। मेरा जो प्लान था, जो मेरा काम था, वो तो नहीं मतलब हो पाएगा। जो कमजोर माइंड का बंदा होगा ना, वहां बैठा ही होगा। इसकी वीडियो भी पढ़िए। ये मतलब रो रहा है, मतलब क्या, मतलब मेरे साथ पता नहीं क्या हो गया। वो भोसड़ी वाला उठ नहीं रहा, मतलब एक जगह पे बैठा हुआ है, जा नहीं रहा वहां से। क्या मतलब इस बात का, मैं तुम्हें दिखाता हूँ। ये अब एग्जैक्ट इसकी वीडियो तो मेरी नहीं मिलेगी, मैंने भी इसको देखा था। और अभी मुझे इसकी वीडियो भी मिलेगी। नहीं है, चलो नहीं है। और ये मतलब इसने 2 दफा ऐसे किया है। असल में इसका इशू ये है, ये कमजोर माइंडेड बंदा है, और ये मतलब अपना इमोशन या मतलब एक बंदा होता है फ्री, बंदा फ्री होगा न, तो वो हमेशा उसको दूसरों का इतना फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा। उसको ये फर्क पड़ेगा राइट एंड रॉन्ग का बारे में। अब इसको रमजान रोजा भी रखना है, और अब बोल रहा है एलए में मैं हूं तो मैं रोजा नहीं रख पाऊंगा, या मैं यूएसए में हूं तो मैं रोजा नहीं रख पाऊंगा। ये कोई फूलिश, ये कोई पागलपन वाली चीज होती है जो बंदा बातें करता है। रोजा जिसको रखना होता है वो रख लेता है। वालेकुम सलाम। जो गाजा में बंदे बैठे हुए, मतलब वो तो 2 साल से वो रोजे में भी है, सारे सारे रोजे में उनको तो, उनका रोजा तो कभी खत्म ही नहीं हुआ। आओ ग्रेट ब्रो, ग्रेट। मतलब उनका 2 साल से फास्ट चल रहा है, 2 साल से। ये वो बंदा है जो रमजान के 30 रोजे नहीं रख पा रहा, और फिर दूसरों को फोन करके बोलता है मैं मतलब मैं जा रहा हूँ दोजख में, तुमने रोजा नहीं रखा। तुम्हें इतना डर रहे तो भोसड़ी ने रोजा रख दे, सिंपल। तुम्हें रोजा रख देना चाहिए। मैं इतना खौफ है, if you are afraid that you will go to the hell, do a रोजा, रोजा रख लो। अंग्रेजी में कैसे बोलेंगे इसको रोते रखने को? फास्ट या फास्ट रख लो। नहीं नहीं रखनी इसको, इसको सिर्फ रोना है। इसकी दूसरी भी वीडियो है, मुझे मिलेगी तो मैं दिखाऊंगा तुम्हें, उसमें भी रो रहा है। चलो अब
Neon, I'm live. Watch it.
इसकी वीडियो देखते हैं आप। अब जो हमारा असल टॉपिक है उसकी साइड में चलते हैं। वो टॉपिक है डिक्लाइन इन द फॉल ऑफ द अमेरिकन एम्पायर। इट्स नॉट अमेरिकन एम्पायर। मुझे लगता है ये सारी एम्पायर का यही फंडा होता है जो इसका ये यूएसए का हो रहा है, मतलब अमेरिका का।
Okay, welcome to the very last class, the grand finale. Today we do the American Empire. July 1944. This is the Bretton Woods Hotel in New Hampshire.
Hollow Knight is not coming.
40 nations get together and they discuss what the post-war peace will look like. Everyone knows that Nazi Germany will eventually be defeated, as well as Japan. So the question now is, how does the world build peace and prosperity after such a devastating war? And the Americans propose the Bretton Woods system. The idea is this. The idea is to facilitate global trade. The American currency will become the reserve currency of the world, meaning that everyone can use it to trade. Now, the term we use for this is exorbitant privilege. This is like the power of God, because you're basically taking paper and turning it into gold, right? That's the power of God. So how can we ensure the Americans won't abuse this power? And the answer is the Americans agree to create a global financial network, as well as peg the currency to gold, which means that the USD is a contract. And at any point, you can choose to exchange US dollars for gold. And so what America does is it transports all the gold from London to Fort Knox. And that becomes the basis for the new global financial system that we still have today. And it is incredibly successful. This is the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. And it is the bank of banks. It is the central bank of central banks. And the idea here is you need to create a system for risk mitigation. So, for example, if maybe a country goes bankrupt, the other countries need to come in and rescue that country's economy. Okay? And so this bank is something you never heard of, but it's one of the most powerful institutions in the world because it facilitates the entire global financial economy. Bretton Woods also created something called the World Bank, which is based in Washington, D.C., and what it does is that it gives out loans to third world nations like China. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, coordinates global financial policy. Okay, so the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, the IMF, among other organizations, now becomes the global financial system. And underpinning all of this is the US dollar as the global reserve currency. Okay, so where did the system come from? Well, it comes from 1688. Remember, this is the year that Willem of Orange of the Netherlands, he goes to England and launches something called the Glorious Revolution. And he takes the throne from James II. When he goes to England, he also brings with him Dutch wealth, right? Because the Netherlands is now the most prosperous nation in the world because of global trade. They have something called the Dutch West Indies Company that has monopolized the spice trade in East Asia. So it's the Dutch East Indies Company. And so it's extremely wealth. Now, as we discussed previously, the Dutch are Calvinists. So they believe that there's a religious obligation for them to get wealthy. Wealth will guarantee their entry into heaven. But for that to happen, they need to ensure their wealth is protected, right? And at this point in history, the Netherlands is being conquered or at war with France, with Spain, with a host of enemies. So it's not, the money isn't safe in the Netherlands, so it's being transferred over to England because England has a navy that is the most powerful in the world. It's also an island, so it's pretty hard to invade. 1694, this wealth becomes the basis of the Bank of England, which is considered the second oldest central bank in the world, but it's really the first central bank in the world. The reason why is this bank, it's a private bank, but it's guaranteed by Parliament, which means that the nation-state of England promises to always pay back the investors in this bank. So why does this happen? It happens because it will resolve a huge issue throughout human history. If you're a king, you need financing to go to war. You often need to pay foreign mercenaries. To get this money, you need to basically borrow from your wealthiest citizens. The problem with this is, as king, you may not want to pay back that money after the war, or you could get killed in the war. Okay, so there's always tremendous risk when you lend money to the king. The Bank of England solves this problem because you're not lending money to the king, you're lending money to England. And the people will always have to pay you back. All right, so maybe they won't pay you back today, but they'll have to pay you back sooner or later, okay, because it's guaranteed by Parliament. And this system is extremely successful. In fact, this system is what allows England to defeat Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars, okay? In 1815, Napoleon is finally defeated. So as we discussed previously, Napoleon, he is a military genius, and he conquers most of Europe, and he defeats England many, many times. But because of the Bank of England, the English have infinite financing. So the British are always financing wars against Napoleon until he is finally defeated. And this establishes the British Empire. Okay? So after the defeat of Napoleon in France, Britain becomes the global hegemon. And the Bank of England now becomes an imperial bank. And the power of this is, before, when you go and conquer a country or a nation, you're always afraid of rebellion. Right? You're always afraid of local elite getting together and overthrowing you. But the Bank of England solves this problem. Why? It solves this problem because now the local elite can take their corrupt earnings and put it in the Bank of England. All right? So now the elite have an incentive to work with the British to maintain their empire. And that's how Britain was able to build the world's first truly global empire and able to maintain such harmony and stability with the empire for such a long time. Okay? The secret was international finance, as embodied by the Bank of England. Okay? So let's summarize the history of central banking. Okay? It's complicated, but we need to understand this history if we understand today's world. First important idea is the Dutch Calvinists, they have a religious obsession with storing wealth. Okay? Remember, we discussed this, right? The Protestant religion demands that you get rich. The Parliament of England guarantees this wealth, thus giving England infinite financing for wars. This is important because if Parliament is willing to guarantee financing, not only can it use all this wealth stored in the Bank of England, but it can also generate new wealth from investors overseas as well. Okay? Third idea, this financing, infinite financing, allows Britain to defeat Napoleon. Fourth, the Bank of England stores wealth of corrupt local elites, allowing for stability and harmony within the empire. Now, this is important. What will happen next is America will emulate this model and create something called the Federal Reserve in the year 1914. So the idea of the Federal Reserve is you have all these provincial banks around America. They get together and decide that we as private banks will convince the government, the Congress, to give us a power to print money. How do you print money? You issue loans, okay? When you issue loans, you're just basically putting money into the system, okay? So in 1914, they developed the Federal Reserve System. And after World War II, America is now able to export this Federal Reserve System all around the world by creating independent central banks in each nation and having these central banks work together to create more wealth for their investors. So there's something really important you have to understand. Nation states compete against each other, but independent central states, all of these nation states, work together because that way it's easier for them to generate wealth for their investors, okay? To grow capital, private central banks coordinate rather than compete. They are parasites that feed off the nation state. Okay, so this is a really important idea that no one understands. The nation state is responsible for protecting this wealth, and the central banks can use the resources of the nation state to feed its capital growth. Okay, and this is the modern financial system that we have today. The central banks basically rule the world. All right. Okay, so this is Carroll Quigley, and he wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope, which I highly recommend. He was a Georgetown professor. He was Bill Clinton's favorite professor at Georgetown. And in his book, he explains how this financial system works, okay? So let's read it very carefully. And he's talking about the 1920s. After World War I, the powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was to be the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. Each central bank, in the hands of men like Montague Norman of the Bank of England, Benjamin Strong of the New York Federal Reserve, Charles Riss of the Bank of France, and Helmut Schacht of the Reichsbank, sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate
being
foreign
a silent
exchanges,
agent.
to influence the level of economic
No, bro, we are learning.
activity in the country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. Okay, so in today's world, it's the central banks acting in concert that dictate financial, economic, and political policy
सीखने के लिए
all
खामोश
around the
बैठना
world.
पड़ेगा.
All right, so how can we understand central banks? Well, the main function of central banks is to control the money supply. Okay, so money is just a concept, it's an idea, it's something that we just made up. And the way the central bank controls money is by controlling its scarcity, which creates the
दुनिया में तुम्हें किसी चीज को सीखने के लिए खामोश बैठना पड़ेगा, खामोश, और तुम्हारा फोकस उस चीज के ऊपर लगाना पड़ेगा, फिर तुम्हारे दिमाग में आइडियाज क्रिएट होंगे. ऐसे तुम नहीं करोगे तो चूते बन जाओ. मतलब तुम सीखोगे कुछ भी नहीं, सिर्फ बात करोगे. बात तब करनी है जब वो बात मैटर करे, मतलब उस बात की कोई अहमियत भी बन सके.
illusion that it's valuable. Okay. Also, you're forced to use money to buy things as well as pay taxes, take out loans. All right. And they control the interest rate, which is the cost of borrowing money. So, another way of saying this is one mechanism the central bank has to control the economy is by lowering or increasing interest rates. If it lowers interest rates, it's just easier, cheaper to borrow money, right? So you can go buy a house or buy a car. If they increase the interest rate, it's more expensive, so people spend less money. So through that mechanism, they're able to control the supply of money in the system. All right? All right, so how can we understand what central bankers are? Well, I'll give you three possible metaphors, okay? And I think these are all legitimate. Central bankers are the ultimate priests. They must control the flow of money to maintain the illusion that money is God. In this way, they are the new Catholic Church, okay? Remember, the Catholic Church in medieval Europe was...
समझ रहे हो? Money can be a god. Shit, it's bad. जब ये लफ्ज बोलना ही सही नहीं है. रेट आए, क्या मतलब? रेट आए मतलब क्या?
the dominant power. It was beyond nations. It represented God on earth. Well, that's what central bankers are today. But also, you can think of central bankers as the game masters. They must control the flow of money to motivate people to play the game. As we discussed when we discussed the Americans, Today we live not in a civilization, but in a game where we're all individual players trying to make as much money as possible. And central bankers are the ones who control the rules of this game. Last metaphor is central bankers are drug pushers. To expand their dominance, they offer easy money, and once a country is addicted or bankrupt, they hijack the financial system, which means to privatize or make independent the central bank, okay? So how do central bankers work? Well, let's do an experiment, okay? Let's use a thought experiment. Let's just say I'm a central bank, and I'm trying to get you to become addicted to my power, right? So what I do is this. I say to you, hey, here's $10,000. And you're like, okay, and what do you want for $10,000? I'm like, nothing. Just go enjoy yourself. So you take that $10,000 and you go on vacation to Hawaii, you live in a 5-star hotel, you're really happy. You come back and say, that was great. Can I get more money? And I'm like, here's $1 million. Go and enjoy yourself. And you're like, what do you want for it? And I'm like, nothing. Just go enjoy yourself. So you go, but this time you're smarter. You're like, no. This money is limited. I need to go invest it if I want to generate more money, okay? Otherwise, I have to go back to the bank and get more money. So you start opening businesses, you invest in restaurants and ski resorts, who knows, okay? But you have all these investments. The problem is you really don't know what you're doing. And you make these bad investments. And eventually what you recognize is you're in debt now. You had $1 million, but now you owe $10 million. So you come back to the bank and you say, listen, I need $10 million. I'm like, fine, but now you have to give me your soul. And you're like, you're just stuck, okay? That's how central banks work. I know this sounds terrible, but that's really how they work in the world, all right? So now I'll give you examples. All right, so what central banks do is they have the power of God. They're alchemists, basically, because they can take paper, which we know is worthless, and turn it into gold, which is what everyone wants. Now,
Technology companies secret to display.
something to remember, and this is really important, is that throughout history, whenever there's a major power, there's always a rising power that challenges it. So in our world today, there's no nation state that can challenge the power of the central banks. But there are these technology companies that are arising that are trying to displace them from godhood, okay? So Bitcoin is something they've invented. It is the American military's fail-safe system in case the American government defaults on the debt and the US dollar loses its reserve currency status. So Bitcoin is being controlled by the American military along with certain technology companies, and they're trying to displace the USD. All right, so there's a conflict going on here. All right, also, artificial intelligence will be used to create the illusion of God, right? Why is there so much investment interest in artificial intelligence? Because even though it doesn't really work that well, it can trick people into believing it is God, that it is omniscient, that it is always right, that it's the ultimate authority. Last example is social media, video games, and porn are the drug of the 21st century, okay? So in other words, these technology
Guys, video games are also drugs.
companies, they're really in the process of creating a matrix in which we just live in a simulation and we're all slaves to the simulation, okay? So this is something that we have to think about, how the central banks are in power, but there's always powers that are arising and which will challenge the power of the central banks. Okay, so how do we get this system? Go back to the year 1960, the world's divided into two, right? It's divided between the capitalist West and the communist East. Now, this is ultimately a war of ideology. It's really a question of which system, capitalism or communism, it's better for humanity. Well, we don't know the answer to that question, but we do know the elite prefer capitalism because capitalism gives them more power, gives them more wealth. So the elites both in China and the Soviet Union, they basically give up, okay? In 1991, the Soviet Union basically unconditionally surrenders, and this creates the complete dominance of the American system, the Pax Americana. So once America has domination, it now can spread its system throughout the world. This is Karl Popper, and he wrote a book called The Open Society. And in it, he questions grand ideologies because he believes that it's these grand ideologies like communism and fascism that have destroyed the world and which have led to World War II. He hates Plato, he hates Marx, he hates Hegel. He thinks these are the three totalitarian philosophers in human history. And so what he proposes is that the height of civilization is the Anglo-American civilization. Okay? The Germans and the Russians are bad because they are racist, because they are nationalistic, because they are grand in their vision. They're always trying to transform humans to shapes and things that are anti-human. But the Americans and the British, they are practical. They are utilitarian. They believe in evolution. Okay, and that's what Karl Popper believes the Anglo-American civilization is really the height of human civilization. But there's actually another way to understand the Pax Americana. And so the idea is, from World War II, we transferred the Pax Americana. And there are major differences, right? So World War II was about the nation state. That was the main constituent body of World War II. In the Pax Americana, what matters is the international rules-based order, which includes central banks, but also includes United Nations, right? World War II was about mercantilism. Mercantilism is that you only trade within your sovereignty, okay? You only trade with your colonies. But Pax Americana argues for global free trade. Global free trade will lead to prosperity in the world. World War II argues for unity of will, and Pax Americana argues for consumerism, okay? The unity of will is the idea that we must be a whole, that the constituent parts together are less than the whole, okay? Consumerism is just individuals should just go and spend money and enjoy their life and don't worry about big problems like the nation state, end of history, these ideas. All right, in other words, what's happened in our world is
Citizen, okay, game. Citizen, glory, sacrifice. Game. Clear, money, cheating. Clear, money, cheating. Citizen is clear, glory is the money, sacrifice is the cheating.
the world's gone from one that focused on civilization to a game. In a civilization, people are citizens who sacrifice themselves in order to obtain glory, okay? So think of Achilles, right? Achilles went to Troy because he was a competition among his other Greeks to seek eternal glory, okay? But in the game, we're all individual players who are trying to make as much money as possible. Now, in theory, you're taught that, okay, the best way to do that is to work hard, be smart, be talented, create something innovative, right? But in reality, the best way to make money is by cheating, okay? What is cheating? Cheating is basically creating a monopoly. And then everyone's just forced to pay as much as you want, okay? So John Rockefeller, Bill Gates, these were all monopolists, and they were the wealthiest people in human history, okay? All right, so after World War II, America is the only major industrial nation left standing. And America uses the opportunity to rebuild both its economy as well as the global economy. And it does so by transferring its wartime economy into a peacetime economy. Okay, in a wartime economy, you are manufacturing goods at mass, right? When a peacetime economy, you're also doing that. The problem, though, is now that you have peace, who's going to buy these products? So what America did was it basically said to Europe, we'll make these products, these manufactured goods, these cars, and you will buy them. Europe's like, we have no money. And America's like, don't worry about it. We'll lend you the money, okay? And so this worked out really well for America. If you were a white high school graduate, male in America in the 1950s and 60s, 70s, you had the best life. You lived better than the nobility of Rome, okay? This is just a guy, he could be a salesperson, he could be a clerk, he could be a factory worker, but he had a car. In fact, he probably had 2 cars. He had his own house. His wife didn't have to work, and he could send his 3 kids to college. Also, they could take 1 or 2 vacations a year to Europe. It was really the best life. And that's what the Pax Americana created, okay? Prosperity and peace for the American middle class. But the problem is that over time, the Germans start to catch up. The Germans were destroyed in World War II, so they were incentivized to work together, to work hard, to rebuild their civilization. And German manufacturing became famous throughout the world, as did Japanese manufacturing, okay? So now what's happening is, because of the superiority of German and Japanese manufactured goods, America was transitioning from a creditor nation, where everyone owed it money, to a debtor nation, where its consumers were buying things that they couldn't really afford from overseas, okay? And again, America could do so because America had the US dollar as the reserve currency. 1961, Dwight Eisenhower is retiring from the presidency, and he says to the American people, I know we are at war with the Soviet Union, it's a Cold War, but we don't have any real enemies. Our enemies are all internal. There is currently in place something called the military-industrial complex. They employ millions of people, they manufacture weapons, and they're intent on war. They are our true enemy. If we allow the military-industrial complex to hijack the American political system, then we'll be constantly fighting these useless wars that will bankrupt our nation. Be aware. This is our greatest threat to our nation in our history. Okay? This is his farewell address. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced powers exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. Okay? He's talking about the military-industrial complex. And it proved present and prophetic because after he retired, America will start engaging in wars around the world that it could neither afford nor could it fight properly, and it bankrupted America. The most famous example is the Vietnam War, okay? Where America lost about 50,000 soldiers and killed millions and millions of Vietnamese civilians. It was a pointless, brutal war that almost bankrupted America, and it almost caused a civil war in America, right? At this time, America was also competing with the Soviet Union in a space race, right? So in 1969, America sent a man to the moon. And this is a real picture, okay? Now some of you might be like, some of you who might be conspiracy theorists, okay? Not me, but some of you might be conspiracy theorists, say, wait a minute here. Why is the lighting perfect on the moon, right? And why are there no stars in space? And why is this flag floating around, okay? Conspiracy theorists would ask these questions. I don't ask these questions because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Just so we're completely sure, okay? Also at this time, Lyndon B. Johnson announced the Great Society, which was this fantastic social program to ensure that each and every American had an opportunity at the American dream. Okay, so you had free health care for the elderly. You had programs like Head Start. It was fantastic, but it's also really, really expensive. So if you are a nation like France, you're like, you know what? America is sending people to the moon. It's fighting all these pointless wars, and it's building all these great social programs for its population. Does America have the money to do this? In other words, is it possible that the US currency, the US dollar, is no longer able to repay its obligations? That's why France, under Charles de Gaulle, sent warships to America in the mid-60s to repatriate its gold. It's afraid that America will go bankrupt. And this proved very, very wise. And after France did this, there's now this fear among Americans that every nation will do this. And then every nation did this, America will go bankrupt, right? That's why in the year 1971, Richard Nixon announces the US dollar will no longer be tied to gold, which means that you can't use US dollars to buy gold anymore. Which means what? Which means the US dollar is based on nothing. The value of the US dollar is now based primarily on people's faith in its value. Okay? So this leads to a lot of problems like inflation and oil shock. So to solve this problem, in 1973, Nixon signs an agreement with Saudi Arabia. Basically, the agreement is that from now on, Saudi Arabia, which is the world's largest oil exporter, will only take payments in US dollars. And whatever savings that Saudi Arabia has will be invested in US Treasuries. Okay? So this is what we call the petrodollar. And the idea here is now the value of the US dollar is tied to the value of oil. Okay?
Is month to mouth to game window.
You can always exchange US dollars for oil. But then Nixon did something that was extremely clever. He went to China. Okay? So for the longest time, China and the United States were at a Cold War. Americans basically isolated China. So in 1972, Nixon visited Mao Zedong.
Italy's leave gaming this month. मैं कोई गंदी गेम नहीं खेल रहा हूँ, मैं खेल रहा हूँ आर्क राइडर्स। उसमें सिर्फ फाइटिंग होती है, बुलेट्स चलती हैं।
Why? The answer is very simple.
तुम चाहते हो मैं बंदों के साथ बैठ के दूसरे बंदों की गंदी बातें करूं, वो काम गंदा कर रहा है, वो बैक बाइटिंग करूं। स्टिल गेमिंग। तुम चाहते हो मैं बैक बाइटिंग करूं, वो तो उससे भी गंदा काम है। एंड आई डोंट आल्सो प्ले वेरी वल्गर गेम। नो यू आर लायर। तुमने जब से लाइव स्ट्रीम मेरी देखना शुरू किया, तुम ज्यादातर झूठ ही बोलते हो। यू लाई, ये मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम यू लाई, you lied. Now slowly your lies are coming down, like everywhere we are seeing it.
Because he needed more consumers to buy US dollars. Does that make sense? He needed people to want US dollars. He needed to create a US dollar addiction. And to do this, what did America do? America gave China everything. America started to ship its factories overseas to China.
हाँ, अल्लाह ताला को तो बहुत मालूम है। जितना मुझे मालूम है, मतलब जितना मुझे कम मालूम है, तुम पता नहीं क्या क्या और झूठ बोल सकते। तुमने बोले होंगे मेरे साथ। I don't care about you. Bro, it need to matter. बंदों के साथ तुम झूठ बोलते हो, बंदों के साथ।
America gave all its expertise and technology to China. America started to educate the Chinese elite. And what's really important is American defense companies started to give military secret technology to China. Okay? Now, I know that in the United States, people believe that China stole this technology. China didn't have to steal this technology because America gave it to China for free. Okay? Why would America do this? To create the dependence on America. Because once the dependence is created, then Chinese will want US dollars. Okay? The intention has always been to create a market for US dollars in order to prop up the US currency. Okay? Does that make sense? So Saudi Arabia gave its oil to the United States.
फिर झूठ बोलने का काम क्या? मतलब इन्होंने चाइनीज ने स्टील की है हमारी टेक्नोलॉजी, वो क्यों झूठ बोलने का? सही। असल में ये एक छोटे सांप को पाल रहे थे अकॉर्डिंग टू यूएसए। वो छोटा सांप कौन है? वो चाइना है, छोटा सांप जो यूएसए पाल रहा था। मतलब जो इंडस्ट्रियल हब बनेगा, चाइना का बनेगा। तो लास्ट में अब चाइना इतना बड़ा सांप बन गया है, अब वो बंदा उसको